Social movements take to the streets in Bolivia to defend their election victory as an international audit on the vote begins. Authorities block access to Panama's National Assembly as protests continue against a reform package. And President Nicolás Maduro hails indigenous people from around the world at their meeting in the east of Venezuela. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo and this is From the South. Bolivia's social movements have been marching again in La Paz to defend President Evo Morales' re-election victory. Thousands of miners, campesinos and others headed through the center of the city towards the seat of government, House of the People, to express their support for the president. The foreign minister called on the main opposition party, Citizen Community, to join the election audit, which began this Thursday with the participation of the OAS.
We think that the political leaders need to assume their responsibilities and keep their word. We hope that this audit of the election process will rule on and clarify all the doubts that exist in relation to the elections. In this sense, we're still waiting for the citizen community movement to state its conditions. We have said we are open to listening to all their concerns, but so far they have not said anything that will allow us to strengthen this audit.
President Evo Morales called on the opposition to suspend the protests until the election audit is completed.
We're not afraid because we never committed any fraud. But someone has to decide. The opposition now say they don't believe in this audit. Yet they don't present any evidence of fraud. So the audit is beginning today. And it is the duty of all of us, including yourselves from the media, to help to bring peace to the country and to find solutions. And one solution is to clarify whether there was a fraud or not. And the only way to do that, in my opinion, is for these international bodies and governments from the Americas and the world to examine the process. And of course, their conclusions must be respected. And so, as this audit is beginning, I ask those who want to organize strikes and roadblocks to suspend their protests until the delegates from the OAS and the three governments involved in the audit give their final report.
More protests are taking place in Panama City, Panama, a day after police heavily repressed mobilizations against a proposed reform package. Authorities set up a fence around the National Assembly building in the hopes of stopping protesters from reaching the building. People have been demonstrating against the constitutional reform package that, among others, includes amendments to alter the state budget, adjust salaries, and remove autonomy from universities. The National Assembly is set to debate the reform package and could vote on it before going on a break until 2020.
They can't block this area. They are so proud to proclaim that the assembly is the home of the people, but they don't even let us protest. Look at how well guarded the building is, with so many police and even guard dogs. And yet they say that's the home of the people.
They should allow us to go in there, to listen to their debate and everything that this reform implies. But they want to do everything behind our backs, and that's very upsetting.
We're now joined live by Richard Morales. He's a professor of political science at the University of Panama and an executive member of Frente Amplio por la Democracia, or the Broad Front for Democracy Party. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you begin by explaining what this package of reforms involves and why are people so unhappy with them?
This is a package of reforms that was imposed by an illegitimate committee or commission that is basically a front for the main business sector in the country. And it's basically a series of reforms that modify the country's institutions to preserve the power of the political and economic elite. Those reforms were then taken to the National Assembly, where they were worsened even more so than in their original form. They are reforms that reduce the division of powers in the country, that concentrate more power in a corrupt assembly, that reduce the recognition of human rights in the country, that deal a mortal blow to the country's social security system, to the right to water, In essence, these are reforms that gravely endanger the social rights of the Panamanian people. The last few days, there have been mass protests around the National Assembly. Those protests have been led by youth movements, by a youth sector which has found the strength to resist the repression that the government has tried to use to impose those reforms. The government has not responded to the youth sectors, to the citizens' cries for more dialogue. They have instead tried to impose those interests of the elite through those reforms on the people. They have used violent repression. There were many injured people in the violent repression that went on yesterday night. But the people have once again come out to protest today.
Now, Richard, we can see that you're on the streets now. What has been happening with the protests today, and do you think protests will continue throughout the week?
Yes, protests will definitely continue. The government tried to intimidate the social movements through the use of force to get them off the street, but that has just invigorated the movements to keep on fighting. There are worker organizations, there are student organizations, there are women's organizations, there are ecological groups, and now the protests, which had been only in the center of Panama City, are now taking place in the interior of the country as well. Other provinces such as Chiriquí, Herrera, Veraguas also have protests today, and the people are raising their voices, calling out for the assembly to suspend and desist from discussing these reforms so that we may undertake a true constitutional transformation. The people are asking for a constitutional assembly, not just reforms to the Constitution. This is an attempt to reform, to contain discontent in the country. But Panama's growth model has shown to be a failure because it has not bestowed benefits on the great majority of the people. Panama is the sixth most unequal economy in the entire world. This is a country that has grown at amazing rates through the use of the wealth of the Panama Canal, but that wealth has not reached the people. High levels of inequality, exclusion, marginality. So what the people are asking for is for a new constitution that does respond to the needs of the people and the needs of the country, not the interest of the elite.
Richard, do you think this is a struggle that is specific to Panama, or have the protests been inspired by the recent uprisings in, for example, Ecuador, Chile, and elsewhere?
I think the protests have definitely been inspired by what is going on in Chile, by what is going on in Ecuador. It helps to break that narrative of fatalism, that nothing can be done, that we are stuck with this neoliberal model, and that we cannot face it, that we cannot defeat it. Panamanians have definitely been inspired by what's happened in Chile, by what's happened in Ecuador, but by the uprisings of people demanding their rights, demanding social justice. So that is what the Panamanians are demanding now, a new constitution that reflects those demands, that are an expression of the failure of the neoliberal model in Latin America and around the world.
Richard, we thank you so much for your time for Telesur English. We had been speaking with Richard Morales. He's a professor of political science in Panama on the current situation in Panama. More news now. Protests against the government continue in Chile, but on a smaller scale than in previous days, as Thursday is a public holiday. In some communities, people organize concerts and open-air meetings to discuss the future of the country and their demand for a constituent assembly to bring sweeping changes. And some protesters also gathered in Plaza Italia, which has been the focal point of huge demonstrations over the last 2 weeks. On Wednesday, the popular uprising won a substantial victory. President Sebastián Piñera was forced to cancel the APEC and COP25 summits scheduled for November and December. Alejandro Kirk reports.
It takes a special facial expression to hide such a big defeat as this one.
As president of all Chileans, I always have to put the problems of the Chilean people, their needs and hopes first. Our government, with deep regret and pain, because it is painful for Chile, has decided not to host the APEC summit, scheduled for November, nor the COP summit, which has due to take place in December.
APEC member countries and the United Nations had realized the obvious. Piñera, refusing to see the reality around him, found himself in a cul-de-sac.
I think this is a clear sign that Chile is a house with a pretty exterior, but which has deep structural cracks. And when your home has such big cracks, you can't receive visitors. They cannot keep on pretending that Chile is some kind of model that is leading the way. Chile today isn't leading anything. What Chile needs to do is show what is happening, ask forgiveness from its people, and repair everything that's been done wrong in recent decades.
Here the people are giving the experts a lesson.
There is an interesting dichotomy here. The famous experts who make up an industry to protect the wealthy got their diagnosis completely wrong. They didn't see what was coming. And now you hear this phrase all the time from panelists on the TV, controlled by the powerful economic interests. But the real experts are those who have shared the dreadful living conditions imposed by the Chilean model.
The debate on who started the violence was answered on Wednesday when a huge procession with no police present reached the Moneda Palace in total peace. As teachers performed a children's dance in the street, the militarized police seized the moment to attack.
The violence was started by the state apparatus, and the main responsibility lies with Sebastián Piñera. He went on television flanked by military officers who are supposed to be the people in uniform, not the servants of the bankers of the rich, of right-wing governments like his, and told the country that we are at war.
The legal aid team at the University of Chile continued to record human rights abuses in the hundreds.
Up until Tuesday afternoon, the Ombudsman had received 752 complaints of abuse.
What we can say so far is that there is a pattern of systematic abuse, not isolated cases, which are carried out in different parts of the city by different actors, whether or not there is a demonstration and whether or not there has been violence. And these acts of abuse include torture and persecution of the most vulnerable groups.
We have received 35 formal reports of sexual abuse, and there are certain acts which have been repeated continuously. This includes solitary confinement and arrests that are not reported by the police, by plainclothes officers using unofficial cars.
The surgical precision of the security forces enabled them to hit an observer from the National Human Rights Institute, identified in bright yellow with 7 pellets. When asked why they do this, they say they're just doing their job.
Coming up, hundreds of people march in Argentina to oppose payments to the International Monetary Fund. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The social and political problems faced by the indigenous people are often aggravated by neoliberal governments. This was the complaint made by participants at an indigenous summit underway in Venezuela, bringing together people from all Latin America and the world. We have more in this report.
Territorial and environmental struggles, a lack of political rights, poverty, exclusion, racism, and discrimination make up the bulk of issues that indigenous people face in most of Latin America.
Extractivism and encroaching by transnational companies into our lands is the ongoing conflict we face. Half of Mexico's territory has been given over to these companies.
From the moment a racist political system is installed with the support of the United States, our identity is immediately in danger. They take away our right to land, to organize, to self-govern.
Experiences are shared between many peoples, from struggles happening in Ecuador to ancestral Mayan lands, experiences of Mapuche resistance, or of constitutional recognition like in Bolivia and Venezuela.
Governments can change, but if there is no revolutionary transformation, like here in Venezuela, then the rich, the big companies, even the government, they can't implement social change. As long as the same rotten people are in power, they will only enrich themselves at our expense.
They say that neoliberal and conservative governments only increase the people's needs.
This Congress is very essential for us, especially the young generation of today, in realizing the importance of preserving cultural values towards the environment and freedom from emancipation, freedom from imperialists and capitalists.
It's very clear that our main adversary is capitalism. As such, many peoples and nationalities are fighting for their collective rights. What's most important is maintaining unity and to remain active to achieve our goals.
Over 20 delegations from Latin America and the world are taking part in this meeting to create a platform for joint coordination and to unite their various struggles.
Ecuador's main indigenous organization, CONAIE, has delivered its proposal for a new economic and social model for the country. The proposal was handed to representatives of the United Nations and the Ecuadorian Bishops' Conference, who have been acting as mediators with the government.
I want to repeat that for the blood of our brothers and sisters, we are not going to accept any new decree that resembles Decree 883. We won't accept it, and Ecuador will not accept it. I want to make that very clear.
Hundreds of people have marched in Argentina to oppose payments to the International Monetary Fund. Under a banner reading, "The debt is to the people, not the IMF," the protesters made their way through Buenos Aires to the local offices of the fund. The IMF has said it wants to talk to President-elect Alberto Fernandez about the future of the $57 billion bailout agreed with the outgoing President, Mauricio Macri. But Fernandez says any new arrangements have to protect workers' rights and address the rising level of poverty. Neva's Premier Mark Brantley has slammed the European Union's tax haven blacklist, calling it an attack on the Caribbean nation's independence. The 28-nation EU set up the blacklist in December of 2017, which causes reputational damage, stricter controls on transactions with the EU, and poses a risk to trade and investment.
I sound a warning here today that our hard-won independence is being slowly eroded by new and different efforts at colonial domination. The EU and others must understand that Barbados and the Caribbean do not desire confrontation and acrimony. We require genuine partnership and respect. Belgium and Germany cannot assert their sovereign right to tax their citizens at 40%, while denying Barbados its equally sovereign right to tax its citizens at 10%. It is not enough for powerful nations to say to small nations that our tax policies are harmful to them without showing us how such harm occurs.
Speaking at the ruling Barbados Labour Party annual conference, the Premier also spoke about the illegal sanctions imposed against Venezuela, as he called on international countries to respect the Bolivarian Republic's sovereignty.
We have no doubt where our dear friends, the United States and others, stand on this issue impacting Venezuela. But the CARICOM position, and listen to me carefully, the CARICOM position, championed as it was by Barbados and Mia Mottley, is a position of principle. Venezuela is a sovereign state, and its people and institutions must be allowed to fashion the best solutions for their country peacefully and through dialogue.
Bahamas is to introduce a new tax relief policy for Abaco, the Cayes, and Grand Bahama until June 2020. The measure is designed to stimulate the economies of those communities most impacted by Hurricane Dorian. Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis has announced that individuals and businesses in these areas will be exempt from paying VAT on a range of items, from water and unprepared foods to clothing and plumbing fixtures. Fuel for generators in communities still without electricity electricity will also be VAT-free. The start date will be announced shortly. There are also plans to set up a National Recovery and Reconstruction Trust Fund, an independent, non-political body to help fund home and building repairs. St. Lucia's Prime Minister Alan Chesney has said his administration has made little headway in dealing with the burglary law. Chesney said he acknowledged that the matter has become a global issue, especially as it relates to human rights violations against the minority group. However, he explained that his government has not taken an official position on the subject, adding that he did not believe tourism would be affected. This, as earlier this month, the president of the St. Lucia Hospitality and Tourism Association said she was saddened over so many LGBTQ travelers refusing to visit St. Lucia because of the Asian law. The Caribbean Policy Research Institute, or CAPRI, says Jamaica's anti-gay laws cost the country around $11 billion annually. CAPRI's co-executive director says these discriminatory practices make the LGBTQ community 3 times more vulnerable to mental health issues.
The incidence of mental health in the general population is around 21%. The incidence of mental health in the LGBT community is 69%. It is more than triple the rate in the general population. That arithmetic tells you that more than half of the mental health issues amongst LGBT people is due solely to our discrimination. Treating mental health costs Jamaica about $5 billion each year, only a third of which is the public cost. The rest is a private cost.
In Lebanon, hundreds continue to march through the streets of Beirut, demanding an end to corruption and economic reforms. Marchers chanting revolution have kept up their action even after the Prime Minister Saad Hariri bowed to public pressure and resigned this week. Demonstrators are now demanding a complete transformation of the political system away from corrupt and sectarian interests before a new government is installed.
Now we are marching in this protest to say all of them means all of them, all of the corrupt ones, and they know themselves very well. We have started from the Central Bank of Lebanon, and now we are heading up to the square to say that all of Lebanon is united.
Our demand is that we need a smaller government of specialists, so that there won't be corruption like before, and most importantly, there should be a Minister of Justice, honorable and honest, because our judiciary system is the one that can bring those who put the country in a state of terror to justice.
A network of rights defenders and medics have taken on the dangerous job of counting the dead as bloody anti-government protests continue in Iraq. The Iraqi Human Rights Commission places the number at more than 40, while the government has stopped releasing figures on the number of protest-related deaths since the strike started on October 1st. On the day Britain was supposed to leave the European Union, the opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn launched his election campaign. Apart from promising to get Brexit sorted within 6 months, Corbyn is also vowing to fight a corrupt system and to clamp down on a privileged elite of tax evaders.
We are going after the tax dodgers, we're going after the dodgy landlords, we're going after the bad bosses, we're going after the big polluters. Because we know whose side we, the Labour Party, are on.
Guyana's winning STEM team has returned home to a hero's welcome after the teens won the Albert Einstein Gold Medal for excellence at the Olympics of Robotics in Dubai. Guyana was awarded the gold medal for the best performing robot, and the country ended the tournament in the top 25% in the world. The team was honored at a ceremony at State House hosted by Guyana's First Lady. The youngsters, who competed favorably against youths from wealthy nations with access to more resources, were able to overcome many stressful roadblocks to display remarkable resilience. The youngest among the team was 15-year-old Kyle Dos Santos.
With the STEM program, what they have various activities. What I got into and learned about was with the mobile app creation, And from there, I moved on to the basic robotics course, and I was recommended for the junior team, but unfortunately, the junior team did not get to travel. So Miss Karen Abrams saw my potential, so she recommended me to join the senior team, where I proved that my worth for the team. So I was able to go.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and other stories at our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.